Hello and welcome to this instalment of Talkin Trim. I'm Jonathon Skinner and today we're looking at the front seat covers, the centre cushion armrest and the seat hardware items for the Austin Healey models. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, the Austin Healey, the Big Heeleys as we refer to them, the 100, 400, 6 and 3000 models, there are a few different variants of seat covers and seat hardware. This specific video is related to the sort of Abingdon made Heeleys, so it's kind of the late BN4 models, all of the BN6 and BN7 models, BT7 models, BJ7 models. However, there were occasions where Healey did swap and use the earlier style seats covers and seat frames for some of those sort of BN4s and BN6s we've seen as well. So always worth just double checking by sending us some photos because we can identify which ones you have. But essentially that is the general rule of thumb of what these are. They're essentially seen as the 3000s manufactured at the Abingdon plant if you ignore the BJ8 models, and then a bit of a crossover with the BN4s as well and BN6s, so just bear that in mind. But yeah, general rule of thumb, you've got the majority of the BN4 late models, the BN6s, BN7s, BT7s and BJ7s, so just bear that in mind. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over the elements of the seat cover kit and the centre cushion armrest in between the two seats, then go over the related hardware which you may or may not require depending on the condition of your current hardware pieces. I can also show you at the back there the trimmed up version of the seat, so that's either results you should be roughly looking for when you're trimming them up at your end, whether it be yourself or a professional trimmer, or if you wanted us to do the work for you, you can either send us your old frames, which a lot of customers do, and as long as they're reusable we can do the trimming work for you, or of course we can supply you with brand new frames and send them all fully trimmed up, ready to go into the car. So that's the general overview of what we're going to be doing in the video. Now, it's worth checking out videos at the end of this video in the link, because I've done various other videos showcasing some of these parts in a bit more depth, especially when it comes to the trimmed items that we offer. I'm very proud of what we output in terms of the trimming, and we do things a very specific way, including the sort of depths of the horseshoes on the backrest, which are extremely tight fitting, but we've kept true to original shape and size on those, unlike a lot of other companies out there who have made it bigger, so it makes it easier to trim but much harder to get the correct tightness and results in the finished product. So we believe in not particularly taking shortcuts in that regard. Again, do check out those videos because I go into a lot of depth on those sorts of things of why we offer and have offered the superior product for decades now. Right, let's dive in. I'm just going to zoom the camera in a bit now. There we are. So what we've got here is we've got the front seat covers. These have been done in dark blue smooth leather, and they've actually been done in a full leather specification, which isn't original. It's an upgrade kit effectively. To clarify what we can offer on seat covers, and the same actually applies to the centre cushion armrest just in the middle there, is you have a 3-tier option. You have at one end of the scale everything in vinyl. At the other end of the scale you have everything in leather, which is what these are. In the middle you have what we refer to as leather faced, which was commonly referred to originally from the factory as leather, and a lot of other suppliers out there also refer to it as leather. Their leather equals our leather faced. Their leather should not be confused with our full leather. Barely anyone else in the market that I know offers full leather kits where there are no vinyl elements to them. They'll offer what we refer to as leather faced but call it leather, which can be somewhat confusing and misleading. So just bear that in mind. If you are going to be looking around and comparing prices, then keep that in mind. But ultimately, comparing prices is a very odd metric when it comes to interior trim items, because the quality of raw material to start with, but then also just the way they're made, the accuracy and fitment and workmanship of the patterns and parts drastically changes through the different suppliers. Do not assume that just because they call it the same kit and colour and materials potentially, that the output is exactly the same. It is not. That is why we've got the name in the industry that we have for supplying the world-class superior kits in terms of quality, fitment and workmanship. You'll find that we have supplied Healey kits to a lot of the main people in the big Austin Healey clubs, including all of the a lot of the head people in the sort of US Heeley clubs that actually end up doing all the concours judging. We've supplied multiple kits to those guys. We supply some of the biggest and well-known Heeley restoration companies in the world over here. So JME Heeley, Murray Scott Nelson, for example, Rules Motorsport, all the guys that are really, really known for their stuff. We have supplied kits for many years, and we are the tried and tested, should we say, when it comes to interior trim for those guys. So just bear that in mind. But yeah, so you've got a 3-tier option on the seat covers. Just don't get confused between that. So effectively vinyl at one end, full leather at the other end, leather faced in the middle. Like I say, this is the full leather version. It's actually going into a BJ7, and the guys have gone for a full leather interior trim kit. So even all the trim panels are leather. So bear that in mind. And what you get in the front seat kit is effectively a pair of backrests. So that's one, that's the other flipped over. Pair of cushion bases, and then you get what we refer to as the gloves. You get 4 of them, obviously. They're just on top of each other, turned inside out, whereas they've been turned the right way. And then you get 2 strips there which go around the circumference locating frame in the car there. So that's the front seats cover kit. It's effectively 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces in that kit. Then separately we sell the center cushion armrest. So this is the armrest that sits in between the seats on the tunnel area, and this is the same spec as well. It's suitable for the models I mentioned before. The earlier Heeleys had what we refer to as the saddle version one, which looped over the center armrest, sorry, the gearbox tunnel, but the later ones here had this one that sits on top of it. Then the BJ8 changed completely, so ignore that. That automatically comes with the foam padding. It's included in the kit, but it's sold separately to the front seats. And then you've got effectively the seat hardware pieces, which are all sold effectively individually. They are handed, some of the pieces, but we apart from a couple of pieces, we sell all of these pieces individually. So for example, the locating frames there, you'd need a pair of them, so you'd need one left and one right. Same with the base pans there, same with the foams there, they're handed, so you'd need one left and one right. The backrest padding inner part there, we sell singly, you'd need 2 per car set. Same again on the actual metalwork, we sell them singly, so you need 2 per car set. But the actual paddings that go on the back of those backrest frames, they're sold as a pair, as are the tacking strips there. They're also sold as a pair, so you'd only need 1 for those for a complete car set if you follow. But I'll go over that in a bit more detail when I get to it. So let's start with the seat covers, and I'll do a fairly in-depth dive into these. But like I say, do check out other videos that I've done which might go into a bit more depth, as I do a lot of these videos off the top of my head, and so I'm always going to forget something, so bear with me on that one. Yeah, so dark blue, full leather, and they've been done in smooth, so there's not much of graining to them. See that most colours that we do, we can offer in smooth or grained leather. Not all of them, but most of them. So bear that in mind. Smooth's ever so slightly more expensive than the grained. And everything's been done in leather. It's a full leather kit. The shade as well is dark blue, but we can also offer what we refer to as AH blue, which is still dark but slightly lighter. Again, for the Heeleys, there's a subject of a lot of debate. It's much like the reds that they used, and in fact the grey that they used. A lot of subjects have debated what the correct shade is. We offer a few different choices because actually we're aware of the fact that it's not necessarily a subject of debate saying who's right and who's wrong. It's the fact that Heeley actually were quite inconsistent in terms of their batch of materials and suppliers. So we know, for example, that this dark blue shade is correct for some Heeleys, whereas AH blue, which is slightly lighter but still a dark shade, is also correct for some Heeleys. So just bear that in mind, and obviously we always recommend and actually pretty much always send you samples before confirming the order. So this has been done in dark blue, which is definitely the darker of these shades of blue. Full leather, so even things like the retainer here have been done in leather. And even these surrounds here. So let's start with those. You've got these 2 strips which effectively are used to trim around this base surround here. Normally for original spec they would be supplied in vinyl, but because this is a full leather kit, we have done them in leather, and we supply them skived, which means thinned. So we thin the leather down to make it a bit more pliable around that piece there. We do that automatically. We're one of the only companies in the industry, if not the only company in the industry, that has our own in-house leather skiving machine. We've had it for a few years now, and it's great because it really allows us to thin down and produce the most suitable parts for certain areas. So you get a pair of those, or rather 2 strips of those that go around the base frame there, which I'll show you a bit more in detail on the trimmed versions over there. Then you get a pair of cushion covers, the bit your bum goes on. They're all fully sewn, obviously. Pleated, genuine chuck and roll pleats, as you can see here. Deliberately, the pleats go off the end there because that there acts as a retainer going round during the trimming process. They are handed as well, so the cushion bases, the bit your bum goes on, is handed. The backrests are not, and they're the same concept for all of the hardware. All of the bits that your bum effectively goes on is handed, but the actual backrest elements are not handed. So we always write on LH for left hand and RH for right hand, but also a key with us are these big triangles here. So if you see anything with a big triangle on like that, protruding out from some of the pieces, I think it's on a couple of pieces there. No, it's only that surround that hands it. That means right hand. So just bear that in mind. And of course, the orientation, when we say right hand, it means as you're sat facing forward in the car, it would be the right hand side of the car or the right side of the car. Nothing to do with where the steering wheel is. It's purely which side of the car you're sat on. So you get a pair of the cushion covers, like I say there, pleated, genuine chuck and roll pleats into 17mm foam. The horseshoe element there is also foamed, which isn't actually original, but it does create a much nicer finish during the trimming process there. And then these surrounds here, these are the bits that actually get handed. You get a stitch seam going down, which allows for it to cut down nicely around the frame where it comes in at the side here for the gearbox. If I just hobble on over to this one here, you can see that helps that shape position down there. So that's the element of the handedness on the cushion bases. Now, in terms of OEM specifications, in terms of how it left the factory, as I mentioned here, these would normally be vinyl. When it comes to the cushion base covers, actually everything on there would always be leather, even for the leather faced version from the factory, which was the original option. It was only when it came to the gloves and the backrest that vinyl got introduced, and of course these bits here, which I've already covered. So you get a pair of cushion covers there. Then you obviously get a pair of backrest covers. Now, just to show you again, genuine chuck and roll pleats. This one actually has its own separate retainer on it, but genuine chuck and roll pleats. Then in terms of original spec from the factory, the horseshoes here would be leather, the pleated panel would be leather, these little finisher tabs here are leather, but then the retainer here is normally just vinyl, as is the back of the backrest there. That would be vinyl as well. Obviously this one here is leather because it's a full leather kit. Chuck and roll pleats. Horseshoe again is foamed, again not original, but makes for a nicer finish. So we've updated that so that it allows people to obtain a nice finish on that side of things. Something to note as well is with the piping, we use leathercloth for our piping, which was original for the era of manufacture for a lot of cars, not just Healeys, but Jaguars, Triumphs, etc., MGAs, all the cars that we do. Leathercloth is sometimes referred to as vinide, or what's the other, Rexon. It's the other word that they use to describe it, but it's effectively similar to vinyl, but it's ever so slightly thinner, it's more robust, and that's why we use it for piping. It's perfect for piping because it goes around corners absolutely beautifully without any creases or crinkles, and it's because it's sort of thinner, it allows for that tight turnover. Vinyl, when you use vinyl for piping, it comes out a bit fatter and it's much easier to snag. If you scrape your nail down vinyl, you'll find it really gets caught up in there and very easy to snag when it's over such a small area like piping, whereas leathercloth is not nearly doesn't damage nearly as much as that. So leathercloth we standardly use for our piping on all of our seat covers where colours allow, which is probably around 80% of our colours, maybe even more actually. 90% of our colours we can get leathercloth in. Some colours we can't, we have to use vinyl, but for the rest of them where we can, we use leathercloth. Worth bearing in mind, a lot of other companies out there do not. They simply use vinyl because they don't want to have to stock another another material like leathercloth. So again, it's these little things that we're known for: the attention to detail and suitability of materials, etc., and the understanding of the materials as well in terms of that. So do be sure to check out my blog handbook post, and I'm going to do a YouTube video showing it as well. It's these little details that matter when you're restoring a car. Don't take shortcuts with these sorts of things. So piping is done in leathercloth. Obviously the piping has been done in dark blue in this particular set, but Healey often used contrasting piping, whites and things like that. It does depend on the colour scheme of the bodywork of the car, so obviously we can do whatever you want in that regard. Then finally with the seats, you get what we refer to as the gloves. So you get 4 of them, or 2 pairs rather, and they are the bits that go around the mechanism effectively in the car that slants the seat back and forth on there. Now that's one of the key differences between the early and late Healeys in that regard. The early ones, you'll just about make it out in here. You see the backrest goes all the way around, and there's no join there for where the glove is coming on like there is in this one. You can see the kind of join there where the piping disappears, whereas the early ones, the glove was effectively sewn and incorporated into the cover itself, and it made it bloody hard to trim. But the later ones, they made it a bit easier with those there. Again, do see videos at the end of this one where I do go into a lot more depth on those side of things. But they're all pre-sewn. These are turned out the way they should be turned out, just for the sake of this video. But you normally get them in the bag, sewn like that, inside out, and you turn the right way around. Now, a neat trick worth doing is trimming some of the excess back just to where the stitching is. Obviously you don't want to cut the stitching, but get closest there. It just means that when you go round the corner round here, it will allow for a better, neater finish on that side of things. Also, it's worth noting, we often hear people asking for help and advice, or potentially saying that the covers aren't fitting correctly because they don't think the gloves are long enough, because there's no, a gap when they come to trim those up in here. There's a gap that doesn't go long enough, and we do that by design. We're not doing it to be awkward or because we don't know what we're doing with it. It's actually a very, very good indicator of whether you've pulled the backrest down far enough on the frame. As I've briefly touched on, and many of my other videos of trim seats touched on, these backrests are notoriously tight fitting and very hard to get a neat finish on, and you need to make sure that this is in the right position on the frame. A lot of people get it to about 85% there, and it means that this area here isn't down far enough, and therefore the glove doesn't meet that, and you get a bit of a gap, and people assume we've made the covers wrong. But actually it's done by design, as it's a key indicator to see how far and how well you have trimmed that backrest. And that's why I have touched on that in other videos as well, because even professional trimmers get that wrong. So bear that in mind. It is done by design. They are tricky, and this is why ultimately we recommend you just let us do the work, because then you'll end up with a great set of trim front seats in the car. So yeah, that's effectively the seat covers there. Centre cushion armrest. It's obviously a sewn cover, has genuine chuck and roll pleats, comes supplied with the foam like that, and an excess, I've stuffed it with a foam just to keep its shape, has the border on it which is deeper than it needs to be, and also has the scrim on the inside of it. You see when it's in the car it sits much lower, but that's all to allow you to compress that down. That will fill and fatten that out during the trimming process, and you obviously, normally it's stitched onto the carpet, so you can hand stitch it on there, but there are obviously easier ways of doing that using modern techniques. So let me know if you want any guidance on that. Then I guess we're on to the seat hardware. So let's start with the frames. Like I say, the frames are unique to that range that I mentioned at the beginning. When it comes to the BN4s, the separator is normally the chassis number. Anything above 68959 or 960, I believe it is, tended to switch to this style here. Anything before was the earlier style, which do see the video at the end of this one to go over that side of things. Obviously, they were inconsistent on the production line, so we always just recommend send us a photo of your seats and we'll tell you which ones they are, and then you kind of have the choice of what you want to do with it. But either way, these are what we refer to as the locating frame. So these are the bits that go onto the floor. They sit on the runners effectively, and they go onto the floor. And then inside that sits what we refer to as the base pan. So that sits inside that, and then the foam sits inside that, and that becomes effectively the cushion base element of things. They are handed. This is obviously all right hand stuff, so I'm now facing forward in the car. You can see it obviously has the cutaway there for the gearbox, same again because that will sit inside there, and then the foams there, cutaway obviously turned up the other way. You can see that the cutaway is on the inside for the gearbox there. The foams are molded latex foams. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I do really touch on it in other videos. But they are moulded foams for complete transparency. They are not made by us. We do get them from one of the major manufacturers that everyone knows. People do, should we say, critique them. I'd say a bit harshly sometimes. But basically, for the money that they are, and they do, I'd say arguably around 80% of the job very well, and then the last 20% you just have to work with basically. But for the money that you pay for them, you can't really complain too much on that side of things. And of course, we're more than happy to help and guide you with that element of things. One thing to keep in mind is people talk about the firmness of things, but that's, I think, an unfair comment on things, because that really does depend on you as a person. It depends on your size, both in terms of weight but also height. People say they sit too high up in the car, but obviously if you're over 6 foot, you're always going to have a problem in a classic car. So just bear that in mind. And like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail on these things, but there are ways around these. We have either assisted customers doing it at their end, where we've shown them ways that you can effectively drill holes, big circular holes into the bottom of these, akin to what Dunlop foams were supplied like originally back in the day. And that means that when you sit in the foam, air gushes out a bit more and it sits you a bit lower. We've also gone down the route of literally slicing out half an inch to an inch or so out the middle of it, and then trimming, so that, you know, we've had customers before that are saying, you know, I'm 6'3", I'm definitely not going to be sat in the car correctly, can you do anything to help? And these are on fully trimmed seats. I'm like, yeah, of course we can. So we can guide you through those sorts of things, or tweak it accordingly, but just bear that in mind. The seat foams are good for the most part, but anything after that you do have to tweak it to your desire, basically, I'd say. So yeah, that's obviously the locating frame, base pan and foam. So they're all the bits your bum goes on. They're all sold separately and they are handed. So these are all right hand as you're sat facing forward in the car. This is all the left hand, and I've obviously kind of semi-joined them together just to see how they sit in them, etc. Worth noting, you know, you look at the foam there, it's not quite filling absolutely everything out, but it's not meant to. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. The more you do on the covers and whatnot, the more it starts to make sense and whatnot. So don't get too panicked. We get some people emailing us with photos going, oh, you know, it doesn't, you've got gaps here, there and everywhere, but they haven't started the construction of the seat or the trimming of the seat. Everything starts to make a bit more sense once you actually start putting things together. So bear that in mind, and obviously we're more than happy to help and guide, but again, we do encourage people to just let us do the hard work. So there are your base elements of hardware. Now we'll move on to the backrest parts, or the squad parts as some people refer to them. So you have the foams themselves, the sit inside the framework. I've tried to do it here, but doing it one-handed, it's not going to stay properly in there. They are identical to one another. So you'll need 2 of those per car set. Then you've actually got the framework itself here. And again, the framework did differ between early and late. The early ones effectively looked like this, but they didn't have the reinforcement elements going from left to right on them, whereas the later ones did. So again, frameworks there, they are identical, left and rights. So you'll need 2 of those per car set. And then you get the padding foam that goes on the back. So this is for trimming around the back of there, They are sold as a pair actually, so you only need one per car set. And then you get the tacking strips, which effectively sit inside here. Again, this is only loosely placed in, but you would want to either glue or rivet that in place, and they sit inside the frame there, and that's something to allow easier fitment. You effectively tack the cover to the bottom section there. Again, they are sold as a pair, so you need one of those. It's worth noting on these foams, we make these generically for all of the Heeleys, so they actually currently have the foam on here, but actually during the trimming process you may want to cut down there so that it stops about there. Up to you really. I think that's the better way of doing it, is actually to cut them, and we are actually considering updating our patterns on those ones, but currently that's how they're supplied. But don't be surprised if you end up with ones that are cut there, because ultimately I think it gives a better look if you end up losing the foam in that bottom section on the back there anyway. So again, this is how it roughly lies in the car. Obviously the foam padding on the back is oversized. You'll effectively be trimming it flush to the edge, but again, do talk to us about if you want any help or advice on photos on that side of things. Then the backrest foam, I'm going to try and do this one-handed, sits obviously inside there. It is a bit of a squeeze. You have to kind of really tuck it in to get it to fit properly inside, but it does go, and effectively you're gluing it or anchoring it lightly to the inside there so it keeps its curvature. Then there is an element of editing the foams that we do tend to recommend, which I've done a completely separate video for on that one. Same principle again, complete transparency with these. We buy them in same place we get these other ones for, so they're not 100% amazing. I've gone into depth in my other videos about how the depth of excuse me using the same word twice there in different meanings, good old English language, but the depth of this board, this horseshoe surround here, is incorrect for originality, and I have done a whole video demonstrating that, but it doesn't matter. The way we tell you to trim these things, it will get lost during the trimming process. But yeah, unfortunately the company that makes these have altered their seat covers to try and make them easier to fit, but you don't end up getting the good result, and also they are wrong compared to the originality. There's quite a significant difference in the width of their horseshoe depth here, whereas ours are almost millimetre spot on for the original, so just bear that in mind as well. But that's effectively all of the backrest elements there. Tacking strips I briefly touched on. Obviously the earlier cars had tacking strips that went around the outside here, much bigger hockey stick shaped like ones, but these ones here, flexi ply, sits on the inside of there, and not all the cars originally had those, but some of them did. But we really do recommend it for trimming. Having a tacking strip there makes life so much easier. Glue can be a very one-way avenue and a very messy avenue when you're having to undo and redo certain elements, which is what you have to do when you're trimming a seat. It's a very organic process. You'll kind of anchor one area, get it right, but then you need to loosen it up again to get the next area done, etc, etc. Again, we're not going to go into too many details, but really do bear that in mind. Tacking is the way to do on that particular area there. And then we've got an example of a trimmed up seat here. Now this is actually one of our display seats, so ignore some of the indentations here. This is where we've had to strap using leathercloth here, because it sits on one of our walls up in our display area at an angle, so it stops the frame from shooting forward. So display seat that we've had for years, we take it to shows with us, so yeah, do ignore these indentations. That's basically just the way it's situated in the building upstairs. If I try and get the base pan out so you can see a bit more, so you can see obviously these are trimmed round the edges, circumference around there, which is those strips at the front there. This is where the tacking strip is here, so you can see obviously we've used staples there because it makes life a lot easier. And then this is obviously the border here. You really want the frame and the piping to be sat there. We see unfortunately ones where you've got a bit of a gap and bagginess up there. That simply means you're not pulling it tight enough down, but you have to be really careful. Here and here are weak points, so whenever you're pulling it down to get it in the correct position, grab hold of those areas as you're doing it and to pull down, because then you're going to minimize if there are any rips or anything like that appearing. But that's often the area there where you have a little bit of a gap, and that's what people say is, oh, the gloves are too short or whatnot. But like I say, it's done by design deliberately to give you the correct positioning on the framework. And like I say, even professional trimmers get this wrong more often than you would like to imagine, actually, which is why we started taking a lot of the trimming in-house, because we know that our covers work really well. I mean, just look how neat and pristine, no bagginess in those whatsoever. When you compare that to a lot of other ones you see out there on the market, it's chalk and cheese, so do bear that in mind. So that's that element there. Obviously ignore these bits here, that's all related to how it's hung up in our display area. You got foam padding on the back here, even the little stoppers here have got trim on them. And then the cushion element here, this is obviously the left hand one because it's got the cutaway there for the gearbox. But you can see, obviously, when everything's said and done, all of those elements of gaps and whatnot that you see between the foams and the frames is completely lost. You don't see any of it during the trimming process, once the trimming process is done. And you're effectively using a decent amount of glue initially, and then you secure them in place with these seat clips as well, which of course we can supply if you need as well. So just bear that in mind. But yeah, like I say, that's an oldish display item which does the job for the purposes of this video, but be sure to check out my other videos showing pristine ones that we've just done for customers all over the world. You know, we literally have customers over in Australia and America sending us their seat frames because they want us to get them trimmed up the way they should be trimmed up, or ultimately you weigh up the cost difference of shipping us your seat frames versus buying new seat frames, I guess is the way to do it. For a lot of these Healey ones, everything's available again, so it's no harm in us replacing the seat frames. But for some other cars out there where you can't get new seat frames, then people do choose to do that, ship them over to us. Yeah, so I think that's kind of covered everything. This is effectively the complete design of the seat that we're looking at here, whereas this is the earlier style here. So do see the video that shows that style there. But effectively, like I say, it's the BN4 models after 68,960 roughly, but don't take that as gospel. I think the crossover kind of happened around sort of late 57, early 58 maybe, but again, don't take that as gospel. We've seen plenty of examples where they didn't necessarily do that and they use the older style seats. Then same again for the BN6s. Most of them were fitted with this, but some of them certainly use the older seat ones from the earlier Healeys. But it tended to be all the BN7s, BT7s, and as per this exact one here, BJ7s. But BJ8's completely different. Shared some of the hardware elements of things, but not all of them. So I would completely negate for BJ8. That rhymes. And effectively see a separate video for that one. Anyway, I think I've babbled on enough now. Sorry, we're well over half an hour, so don't know where all that went. Hopefully you found it useful. Please remember to, like I say, check out videos at the end of this one. Like, subscribe, share with other classic car enthusiasts. Ask me any questions in the comments. Better still, contact me via our website or email about your restoration. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next time. All the best.